Well, good morning. Early, a little bit of an early time for a plenary lecture, but I'm glad you're here. This is a very significant topic, obviously. As I was preparing my slides, every morning I will take a look at the next development in AI, and I said I have to change my slides. The last time I did this was last night at 11:30. I'm sure if I were to give the same address tomorrow, it will be slightly different. Well, I want to thank the Academy for inviting me to give this lecture, as well as also the fact that the Academy is focusing on this hugely important topic, something that is going to dramatically change our lives in many different ways. And I think it is very important that we pay attention to it. One question I had for the Academy is why they selected me. I am a chemical engineer. I don't really know a lot about the fundamentals of large language models and the like. I mean, I have a general understanding of it. In fact, if you were to ask ChatGPT who is the best person to deliver a plenary lecture today, I don't think they will put my name in it. But from now on, maybe I'm going through the good graces of ChatGPT, so the next time somebody will invite me to give a plenary lecture on this subject as well, and ChatGPT will bless it. I want to also say that because I'm a chemical engineer, I'm going to use a little bit of some sort of a chemical notation here and there, so please don't get too excited about it, but sometimes I feel that using of chemistry and chemical engineering in terms of understanding social phenomena is a little bit underrated. People talk about physics, econophysics and the like. I think econochemistry should be part of our conversation as we go forward. So I'm going to use a little bit of that. Again, please take them with a grain of salt. So what are the relevant questions one can ask about engineering education? And so I'll go through and the time that we're in, and I'm going to go through some of these questions. First, what will or should engineering be like in the years to come? And by the years to come, actually we mean perhaps even the months to come. Will be a reflection of the engineer of today, or it will be something different? Most importantly, can the engineering profession play a role in shaping its own future in these times that we're living in? Can a future be created where engineering has a broadly recognized image that celebrates the exciting roles that engineering and engineers play in addressing societal and technical challenges? And finally, how can we educate engineers to be leaders, able to balance all these gains afforded with the vulnerabilities created by their products, something that we will discuss later at the forum? These are very important questions. They are very applicable and apt for today's discussion. The problem is that these questions were asked 21 years ago in the engineer of 2020. I know that Anita Jones is here today. Her late husband, Bill Wolf, was president at the time, and I think this is when the whole thing started, the engineer of 2020. It was published in 2004. At the time, I was almost starting as a dean of engineering, and I perused that book to try to understand what should our students learn from the engineer of 2020. Then another book came out from the Academy a year later, Educating the Engineer of 2020, which is adapting engineering education to the new century at the time. And what were these attributes? Attributes: analytical skills, practical ingenuity, creativity, communication, business management skills, high ethical standards, professionalism, leadership, dynamism, agility, and lifelong learners. These are things that were articulated in 2025. And indeed, our engineering profession was shaped and moved from that time until, remember, the engineer of 2020 graduated 5 years ago. So there is definitely, an Academy, a need for the engineer of the age of intelligence or something similar to that. I think that NRC should be knocking doors on us for us to actually try to think about that and how we're going to move forward. But my question that I have here is that would these attributes still be the key attributes in this age of AI? Let's call it age of intelligence. Tom Friedman had an article in the New York Times either last week or the week before. I believe he coined it as the age of intelligence. I'm not sure that's the appropriate term. It's something that we are going to have to deal with and create something that actually has a lasting value and reflects what's going on. And what this engineer of the age of intelligence, how should be educated. And here I like to make reference to Chuck Vest, president of the Academy. I remember when I was inducted 17 years ago and I got to meet Chuck, I was so impressed with his quality and the way he was leading the Academy. And in a meeting that we held at UAC in 2010, and this is a picture of Chuck there, Chuck was known to say that we live in the most exciting era for science and engineering in human history. This is something that we can keep saying year after year after year, that we live in the most exciting era for science and engineering in human history. And I thought I should quote Chuck because this is actually something that will stay there for quite a while. And so that is actually the question that we're going to ask. And hopefully I'll give you an answer at the end of this talk, whether it is going to be something that has lasting value or not. We will have to figure it out. As I go ahead and think, what is engineering and how are we moving forward in this world? And actually, I'll mention that I'm the editor-in-chief of PNA's Nexus. PNA's Nexus captures all kinds of disciplines, from engineering and physical sciences all the way to medicine and biological sciences, as well to political and social sciences. So I believe that a lot of the things that I will say today apply to many other disciplines as well, and you will see the reason why in a moment. So the first question that I want to ask is, what remains constant? What will remain constant in the foreseeable future for all of us? Because this is how we're going to have to shape the education to our students and potentially the professions that comes along with that. The first thing to note is I firmly believe that engineering is fundamentally about purpose, and I will give you a definition later on why that's the case. And so purpose about making changes, purpose about providing solutions, this is something that we pursue constantly, relentlessly, to the benefit of humanity. So let's ask the question, what remains constant? And I have these 4 buckets in which describe the things that remain constant in the future. The first one is what I call sustainable prosperity. I'll give you an example, a reason why I don't call it sustainability, but rather sustainable prosperity. A big other bucket is health. A third big bucket is security. A fourth big bucket is enriching life. This is what we do in engineering. We try to solve problems that belong to these 4 buckets. If there's another bucket that I'm missing, I will be more than happy to incorporate it. Please send any suggestions that you might have. But what we do, we work on energy and materials and bioengineering stuff, security, whether it is national defense or cybersecurity, electronics, enriching life, how engineering enriches and technology enriches life in many different ways, from entertainment to art to education to the scientific discovery and so on and so forth. And all of this have an engineering impact on society. I mentioned that I will make a quick note about sustainable prosperity versus sustainability. There, it benefits to be Greek. And the reason for that is that the Greek word for sustainability is aiphoria, which means, if you translate it, it means forever green. Forever green is something that is affiliated with sustainability, something that makes us live forever in a good way, and that's why I call it sustainable prosperity. So actually, if you translate in Google sustainability to Greek, you will get a different word called biosimotis, which means viability. But my colleagues in Greece, when they talk about sustainability, they talk about aiphoria, which has a much more positive view of the world. And I believe that we should change the conversation and talk about sustainable prosperity, that what we like to do is keep our planet moving in a direction that is sustainable and has prosperous for all its inhabitants. And I think that's something that I like very much to keep pushing. By the way, these are also articulated in the Grand Challenges for Engineering, another big report that the academies came about, and also describe these 4 buckets in general. And when you look at the 14 Grand Challenges of the academies, they fit very nicely in these 4 buckets. So my take is that these are all, by the way, interdisciplinary, impactful, and relevant, and they demand a deep technical domain knowledge. In other words, in order for us to make progress in any of these areas, requires that we have a deep domain knowledge about each, and depending on which areas, of course, that we're working on, in order to be able to make progress there. Now, and of course, they are all increasingly enabled by advanced computing and AI. I will make another sort of a bold claim that all disciplines that in all the sciences also fit in these 4 buckets. Now, there may be a bucket that it's out there again. I'll be more than happy to incorporate it. But I believe that whether we are in the political sciences or social sciences, or in medicine or engineering and physical sciences, the key questions that we're addressing fit all in these categories. So perhaps what I'm going to discuss today, or I'm discussing today, applies not only to engineering, but all across all disciplines. People talk about all corporations are technology corporations. Maybe all disciplines become technology disciplines. I'm not sure about that, but definitely we are moving in this direction with AI. Now, many of you have seen that, or those of you who are familiar with the Grand Challenges, that all of this is nothing else but a Maslow hierarchy for humanity. And people know about Maslow hierarchy for individuals. I believe, and I think this is not my idea, but I borrowed it from the Grand Challenges report, all of these are Maslow's hierarchy for humanity, and this is something that we will pursue, hopefully, as human species for the foreseeable future. We want our world to be sustainable and prosperous, healthy, secure, and safe, and also to enrich life in many different ways as we want it, whether this is political systems or other things as well. So to me, what remains constant and will remain constant in what we do in engineering and many other disciplines is this Maslow hierarchy, and I think we need to pursue it, and we will be pursuing it for many years to come. And that demands this deep technical domain knowledge. Now, what accelerates? On the other hand, we have here AI and advanced computing. Probably quantum is coming up at some point, and this accelerates at an extraordinary pace. This is no longer the Moore's law in which things are exponential. I believe we are approaching close to a singularity, although I don't want to say that Kurzweil's sort of a prophecy has been reached. Ray Kurzweil, back in 2007, wrote a book called The Singularity is Near, in a way indicating that technology moves at a much faster rate than simply the Moore's law exponential. I mentioned before I go there that I am a chemical engineer, so I will give you an example how I can provide for you in 2 sentences Moore's law as well as Kurzweil's law. So let's assume that innovation happens as a first-order chemical reaction. So this is at the bottom there. In other words, it's autocatalytic. It is autocatalytic, and I hope that my chemical engineering colleagues here will completely forgive me for doing all these simplifications. But nonetheless, the rate of change is proportional to the state of innovation. That gives you an exponential, and that gives you Moore's law. At the same time, if it is not autocatalytic in that sense, but you have a second-order reaction, or actually a reaction that is higher than first order, then the rate of change is proportional to A, let's say in this case to the power of 2, and that gives you a singularity. So it's kind of simple to think how by changing the way innovation works, the dynamics of innovation, you can get something that goes from completely exponential all the way to a singular point. Are we in the case of singularity? Probably not. Are we approaching it? Maybe. What we are doing here, we know that there is a phase transition to autonomy. We are not having simply a inflection point that people talk about. I think we have a phase transition into something different, and this is where AI is coming in. This is why we have this meeting today, and this is what we're going to examine later on. And here I give you a slide that shows you the number of data points that are trained for LLMs. This was an old slide, and you can see that this changes very, very fast, and this predicts a singularity of 2022. Of course, this did not happen in 2022, or maybe it's going there, but definitely there is some significant change that's going on. So I'll mention about a tool for AI. So I will ask the question, is AI a tool? Is it technology? Is it both? And I will try to show how these two, depending on how you look at it, may affect the way we teach and may affect the way we do research. And I think this has to be incorporated in the various ways. And issues that come along are, is this an AI an automation tool? Obviously. Is it something that augments our intelligence? And that actually has been said many, many times. And third question is, how do we authenticate AI's output? And so I use three different words here, all starting with an A, in order to basically say, provide some characteristics about AI. My next tenet is that for all engineering students, we need to have a deep technical AI knowledge. We need, as engineering students, and that differentiates us from everybody else in other majors, that requires that we understand whether we are in engineering, in chemical engineering, or in computer science, or in EE, that we need to understand how AI works, demystify it if possible, explain it if possible. So we need to have a deep understanding of, let's say, machine learning or reinforcement learning or neural networks and the like. And so to me, this will become a fundamental point in all engineering education. We're actually trying to incorporate it at USC, which is my school, in which we try to make sure that all our students, regardless of majors, have a very good working knowledge of AI in the fundamentals of that. Because, of course, it's a technology that it is spectacular, but trying to understand what underpins this technology is very important. So this is my second sort of a tenet. The first tenet was that we need to make sure we have deep domain knowledge so that we understand intuitively, physically what's happening. The second is to have a deep understanding of AI so that we understand how AI works, so that when we put the two together, we have some sort of a better understanding and hold of what's happening. So when we have constant purpose and fast acceleration technology, leads to, this is my conclusion of this slide here, to a close intertwining of technology with humanity. Engineering is always about intertwining of technology with society, and it has been all the time, the same all the time. But with AI, I think we have a much closer intertwining, and that creates all these big issues that we're going to discuss at the forum later on. So I have for you an equation which is in terms of objects. So this is my first attempt to write an equation without numbers, and it will be objects. So please keep that in mind. You can basically accept it in the future, or you can throw it completely away and say, this guy is crazy. But nonetheless, here's my equation. When you take a triangle, which is actually people in psychology call it a pyramid. I don't know why, but actually it's a triangle. The Maslow hierarchy triangle, and you add to this singularity, then you get a double helix. Now you say, well, what the heck is this guy talking about? Well, I'm saying that this double helix is in the form of two strands. One is technology and the other is humanity. And the two press against each other in a way that we have never seen before. And I think that is the fundamental question that we're going to have to address. How does this double helix work, and what is actually the way by which we either untangle it or try to make sense of that? I was just thinking that I should use the YMCA analog here, and so I will do it here, and I say triangle plus singularity. I assume this was not captured on film or anything like that. So this is what I call a symbolic equation for our times, which are all multi-hyphenated. But what I'm trying to tell here is that this very tight interconnection requires to have the human in the loop, because it requires trustworthiness. As humans, we need to understand what technology gives us and also make sure the technology is trustworthy. If you look at the definition of trustworthiness or trust, it consists of two components. One is competence, technical competence, and the other is character. So having a combination of the two together provides trustworthiness. This is the third item that I'm going to say, that for all our students, we have to make sure they are involved. We call it AI ethics, maybe, or something else. But definitely, I have them understand the human values and be the guardians of the human values that we have as AI advances at the extraordinary time that it does. So I now, having said this, I like to go very quickly through two different items. One, AI as a tool, and second, AI as a technology. For AI as a tool, I'm going to use this as an example of catalyzing AI being a catalytic teaching assistant, a mentor in education, and not a means for delivering content. So here, I'm going to use a little bit of, again, a catalytic thing here, to be honest with you. Learning is essentially a big chemical reaction, if you think about it, because it changes memory for a very long time. So if you look at it in a very big way, and I try to think about this way, that a course or even a curriculum is like a very big chemical reactor where a lot of chemical reactions happen in which the faculty and the students interact with each other, and then they come up with a chemical reaction item, and that's my equation here. And I will claim that AI in this context, in teaching, is the catalytic agent that makes this reaction go faster. And so those of you who are chemical engineers are very familiar with a curve like this, in which learning goes up, course duration is on the horizontal axis, and then essentially, because learning is increasing, there is an activation energy barrier. AI is helping lower this activation energy barrier. So the question is, how do we develop these tools in order to be able for this to happen? And I think if we look at it from this perspective, it makes absolute sense to have this interpretation of AI as how we teach, not only for our engineering students, but across every type of teaching or instruction that's going to happen. So I look at AI in this case as the catalytic agent that allows you to make this reaction go faster and also lower the activation energy barrier. And it enhances critical thinking, does not supplant it, it's a learning companion, and requires maybe new forms of textbooks, in which, in addition to having a pure text, you may have videos, you may have other things as well. Every day you open the newspapers and you read all kinds of different things and tools that are developed in terms of AI as a tool. But this, in order to be, it requires a very significant demand on our faculty to have an expertise that's superior to the TA, in this case AI. Ask a different question as well. Is the concept of a TA going to continue being the same way it is in the future, when we have this tremendous AI catalytic agents, if you wish? So these are questions that are going to be asked in the future, and by future I mean in the near future. And I believe that, I must say that our students are a lot more comfortable with this type of interaction with AI than many of us are. And I think you will see that sooner or later there's going to be some sort of I wouldn't call it a crisis, but something that will force a lot of the way by we do teaching to change in a dramatic way. So, and another thing as a tool, as a catalyst, I want to mention that in the previous reaction scheme that I gave you, all students are considered as indistinguishable particles. if I was to use a physics metaphor here, meaning they are the same. The professor teaches to this big class over here. There is no differentiation between this student or that student or that student. However, AI may actually allow us to do a selective and adaptive way by which we teach. And so, in which case the pace of learning is adaptable to individual student, and I will have that there are different species, each student is different reaction rates, if you wish, different conversion times. So here's my new equation. You would not be, don't be surprised if you see another equation in which the faculty individually reacts with different students, student 1, 2, and 3. AI is used to actually facilitate the learning of these individual students. And in this case, perhaps for the course extent and the learning for student 1 is this particular curve, but for student 2 is this curve, and may have a longer time in order for this person to learn, or has lower activation energy, or different things. I think AI will allow us to be adaptable and also be able to move away from a system in which everyone is in the same room. There is this conversation has been done before. The sage on the stage, which emits sort of radiation to everyone, and then people basically depend on how they absorb this radiation, learn or not. But maybe it will be a different way by which we will be teaching. And so this allows individual attention, authentication of learning, and potentially the designing of interactive and other learning experiences, and ideally enhances learning. However, let's make a big sort of a caveat here. Learning is not simply about what I just described. It involves emotional, social interaction, mindset of growth, involvement in curiosity, question asking, and importantly, the freedom to fail, which are all characteristics of innovation in many different ways as well. So these are items that an AI perhaps will not be able to address, and these are the things that we have to also cultivate in our students and also enhance it, because this is the other part of human development that we actually have in any classroom, in any educational setting, to make sure that, as someone has said, learning, going to a university or learning is also about becoming, and actually making sure that you're going in that direction as well. So this closes a little bit my conversation of AI as a tool. AI as a tool, I think, will be used more and more in our instruction in significant ways. There's a lot of effort that's going on in this area. Let me talk a little bit about AI as a technology. And for this, I have to define technology a little bit. I use a definition from Brian Arthur in 2009, who says the following, and I found this to be so useful for me when I talk to people about technology. And by the way, I think in the National Academy, we sort of try to put technology a little bit as secondary. I believe engineering and technology in many ways are pretty much can replace one another. And the definition I have for technology here is leveraging phenomena for useful purposes. Now you say, this is what we do in law. We leverage phenomena for useful purposes, or in business, or other places as well. But the truth is that this is what engineering does. We leverage phenomena for useful purposes. Now, what are these phenomena? They're physical phenomena, chemical, biological, and increasingly social and behavioral. I know we have done a lot of work in computer science, where computer scientists address more and more social and behavioral phenomena. And as I go down from physics to social, there is an increasing complexity and increasing convergence. These are words that we have known for quite a while now. Now, if you're a physicist, you will strenuously object to what I say here, because for a physicist is the most complex and the most interesting things to ever happen. For the rest of us, we understand physics, but not to the same extent. And in my opinion, as we move down, then chemical, biological, more complex, and certainly social and behavioral are even more complex than that. And then, by useful purposes, they bring in complexity, policy, unintended consequences, ethical and moral. In a way, we see again the double helix. In the traditional sense, this double helix is very well defined. Some development happens here. Policy is developed to do this. There is a particular cadence on how we do these things. These things have been working well over in a number of years. With AI, this thing is going to change dramatically because this intertwining is tighter and tighter. And all of this converges into what I call engineering plus, because all these sort of concepts can be applied to many other areas as well. I am very engineering-centric in this and not apologetic when I talk to my other dean's colleagues about that, because I see that this actually permeates pretty much many other disciplines as well. And as I say, this is also true for all scientific exploration. Now, let's talk about AI as technology, leveraging data for useful purposes. And the difference between technology, which is not an AI, where there was phenomena. By phenomena, I mean Ohm's law, Newton's law, fluid mechanics as the way we know it, many other things as well. AI doesn't care about any of that. It does care about data, and the better trained as a model, the more accurate the predictions are, and the more useful this thing is. So AI for research is going to actually become more and more of a dominating feature in the future. And instead of phenomena, here we have data of all kinds, and you can use data to predict all kinds of interesting things, interpolate, extrapolate, and move forward to a certain extent. The purposes remain the same. The intertwining remains the same. However, there is complexity and convergence is inherent to all this data, as opposed to the previous phenomena, that phenomenological way by which we do that, in which we say, here is physics, here is chemistry, here is biology. With AI, we can, because we deal with data, we can actually do a convergence and address complexity in a much different way than before. So AI will help us make significant changes in the way we do research. The question is, can AI innovate? And this is a question that I'm going to have in a moment. And also, what are the explainability and insights that AI can bring us, in addition to the ubiquity of digital twins, which actually is going to dominate many of the things that we do, given the fact that we need to represent them accurately. And this converges into what I call AI plus. Every self-respecting university has an AI plus thing to there. At USC, we have a joint program, AI and business. And you will see AI and cinema, and AI and this and that. These things are converging in a very, very fast way, and all of this has to do with the fact that you have the data by which you can manipulate or move forward the discipline. Accelerates research, for sure, but can it create innovation? And that's an important question. Is AI simply the linear combination of things that have been published in the literature, put in a very nice way? I will show you one final slide of that. Or can it create true innovation? Also, the other question that comes in is the large resources needed. It will have a tremendous implication for academic versus corporate research. Academia doesn't really have the ability to have these big data centers and also water and other things that are required in order to be able to do that. And that's something that we'll discuss later on. And finally, research integrity. As an editor-in-chief of PNAS Nexus, we deal repeatedly, we make sure that how we publish has a research integrity and reproducibility about that as well. So I will now reach the point where I can answer the question I posed before, maybe, and I will call this the engineer of the age of intelligence. That's a tentative title. We can change it. We can call it anything else that's more apt. So what should be engineering like in the years to come? I think we should aspire to augment the intelligence to solve grand challenges and further enrich in life. I think that's something that we have to make sure our students understand and push forward. Would be a reflection of the engineering of today or fundamentally different? I think we're going through a phase transition. So how this is going to play out, it remains to be seen, but definitely it's not going to be necessarily a reflection of what it is today. Maybe it will take a different form. and will emphasize both strands of the increasingly tighter technology-humanity double helix. I put the other two questions together. My answer is yes, and we require three items: deep domain knowledge, immersion in AI technologies, building the character to uphold human values. We have to make sure that our students understand all these three things very well. As I mentioned, some people call it sometimes AI ethics. To me, I think it's a bigger item than that, and it is how we make sure that our students have the understanding of human values and uphold them in a way by which we will make our life in the future and the future generations much more enriching and much more enjoyable. Now, in 2004, we asked engineers on the report of the Engineer of 2020 to become more skillful in their roles in society. Soft skills, business skills, make them be part of society in general. I believe that today, society will ask engineers to be the bearers of deep knowledge and truth. We are going to have to be the people that actually certify, if you wish, or making sure that what AI produces is actually valid. It is not, obviously, it doesn't have hallucinations, and it is harmless, helpful, and honest, as we put out. So I think that we have to be that, and in part, the trust needed for a better world. Now, I will close with two slides. For what it's worth, this is the World Education Forum, and it shows that the future of engineering from today to the future, engineers look good here. This is the very dark blue, and you can see the dark blue goes and occupies different other areas as well. You have IT in the light blue. That looks not too bad. Research, for some reason, is not as strong as it should be. Education is even less. But anyway, this is what the world the WIF is actually predicting. Whether this is something that will happen in the future, I'm not sure. But definitely, it's good news for engineers in some sense. And as concluding remarks, in this intertwining of technology with humanity, we have to be the quintessential human in the loop. And I mean it seriously and sincerely. Engineers have the ability to do this because we understand not only deep domain knowledge, which we have to continue, but we have thorough knowledge of AI technologies and the creation of an outstanding character. That's something that we have to start doing more and more in engineering schools, because I think the last thing we want is to continue to be viewed as plumbers, because a lot of people look at the engineers, well, hopefully this is changing, as plumbers, and I think that is not what we do. We do a lot more than that, and we have to be leaders, as we do here in the National Academy. This calls for AI as a tool and also as a technology in ways that are helpful, honest, and harmless, and explainable. So attributes of purpose and character, an additional technical competence to lead to trustworthiness. And I will close with this very simple note here. When I first started as an assistant professor at UAC, my then chair, Joe Goddard, who actually is a emeritus professor at UCSD, told me engineering is about three things: energy, materials, and information. I said to myself, fantastic, I am in energy, it's great, I'm part of that. Well, I think that, first of all, it's fascinating that today AI encapsulates all three together: energy, materials, chips, and information, data. It is incredible that this thing actually has coalesced into this very interesting thing. What I'm adding here is that we have to also add the trustworthiness and trust as part of that, and to help keep the anthropo prefix in humanity, rather than have anthropo in Greek means human. So you see a lot of startups and companies in AI, they use the word anthro thing. I think we should keep that particular prefix into humanity and move it away from technology. That's my sort of ancient Greek ancestors pushed me to go in that direction. And I think that this actually explains this intertwining between humanity and technology. I'll stop here, and I hope this was something of interest to you. Thank you.